I like this quote I just heard the other day. Winston Churchill said, success is going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm.
Success is a simple math equation. It's getting up one more time than you failed.
Yeah, don't let somebody tell you you're not intelligent. There's different ways to be intelligent. Find what you're good at and your passion, and when those two meet up, then that's what you should stay doing.
ADHD Rewired, episode number 32. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. Whether you have ADHD and you want to learn more about it, or you are looking for ways to organize your time, your things, or the many details of life so you can get more done, this show is for you. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank my sponsor.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Check show notes for link.
Hey there, Rewired community. Eric Tivers here. It is October 3rd, 2014. It is officially ADHD Awareness Month, and I'm not going to do a big intro to this episode because it was a little bit of a longer one, and we cover a bunch of different topics. So if you want to see what we cover, check out the show notes. But it is ADHD Awareness Month, so I want to just ask you, what are you doing to spread ADHD awareness? You can like the ADHD Rewired Facebook page and share this episode with other people. The other thing that you could do that would be really helpful is leave a review on iTunes, because then people that go onto iTunes will see, what's this ADHD Rewired podcast? Seems like a pretty cool thing. So I'm not going to talk any more about this episode. We talk about a lot of really cool topics, and enjoy. I have Daniel Bowling on the line for the second time this week. We at ADHD Rewired are all about the redo. So the redo was because of both internet connection issues and brain connection issues. We talked on Monday, and my brain was at half mast because I did not get enough sleep over the weekend. So, Daniel, thanks for coming back on for a second time. I do appreciate it.
Not a problem.
How's your week been?
It's been good. Actually, I've been thinking so much from our last talk. I'm happy I get to talk to you again, because you told me about your issues, and I've really been relating and thinking of how, what'd you say, it's not time management, it's energy management?
Yeah.
And that's really impacted me this week.
Tell us how.
Well, not necessarily like I've conquered it, but I've been more aware that I've been failing. I've been staying up too late, had too much going on, and next week I'm going to make an effort to be totally different.
Well, what I would encourage you to do is to totally tackle one thing and do that differently. I think that we all have this tendency with ADHD we get this moment of excitement, like, okay, we're going to really do better, and we try to change everything, which then causes us to end up changing nothing.
Yes.
So what would be the one thing that you want to change next week?
Well, I think that probably going to bed earlier. That way I can start my morning off feeling better.
I wish you the most success with that one. That's been my biggest challenge that I still struggle with. So it's tough. Before we go in any further, because we tend to just dive right into the middle, and a good intro would really include me introducing you, or you telling us a little bit about who you are. So Daniel, would you give our listeners just a little bit of information about who the heck are you?
Well, I am 29 years old. I grew up on a farm, one of 4 kids. All my siblings have kids of their own, so I'm feeling a little pressure, but
So you're an uncle, which is so much fun because you get to get the kids all riled up, and then you go home and leave them with their parents.
I do like that part of it, yeah. Yeah, I'm not ready to be the dad myself. I can still send them home. But As far as my career goes, I've done a little bit of everything. Tradesman, I've been surrounded by tradesmen all my life. So I've done construction and worked on cars, and eventually I fell into the furniture industry and was a reupholstery, custom design build expert and part owner of a business that I walked away from a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so I've done went full circle from learning the trade, starting in the trade 10 years ago, to owning my own business, to deciding it wasn't for me, and now I'm trying new things out.
What about your own business wasn't for you?
Well, I guess you could say I was self-employed, but I was a partner in the business.
Okay.
And my better half in the business, who is a good friend of mine, he did all the design engineering and very type A, and I was the creative design. I gave him what to design, and we worked together. Mm-hmm. We were a great team. He ran administrative. It's just wasn't really my dream. I was helping him build a business, but we didn't really have a direction. So we brought in a partner that had money, and it was just not a good fit. And I decided I wasn't happy. I had a great team around me, but I wanted to be happy, so I just left. And
was there something that, like something specific you can point to that made you realize that, you know, this really isn't a good fit?
I can go into some actual personal details of how we weren't a good fit, but he would probably sue me again. And,
again?
Technically I'm not supposed to say anything bad about him. So if he's listening, I've not said anything too terrible. But when we left, we had a great reputation as a company. He just alienated our customers, and we didn't think it was a good fit. So we, upon the recommendation of many people within the industry, we left, and they also left as clients, and we all went our separate ways. But we were sued because supposedly we took them all. But really, they karma, I guess. People go, they like working with certain people, and if it changes too much, I guess they can recognize it.
Yeah, I think that I think a lot of us have been in situations where we have those kind of no compete clauses, there's I think there's a lot of problems with those. So you realized that this wasn't for you. It wasn't a good fit for you. You weren't feeling it. You weren't happy. So what did you do next?
Well, I was a little lost for a little bit, but I had no trouble finding work because I found that it wasn't necessarily my exact trade set that people really appreciated about me. It was my approach to problem solving and actually getting work done. So I just started accepting jobs, doing whatever it was that people were calling me up for. And
well, that's interesting, Dan.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because that's a mindset issue, it sounds like.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm all about mindset, which is, I don't know if we mentioned yet, but that's how I ended up starting my own podcast.
That wasn't even mentioned yet. So Daniel does have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and then get into the mindset.
Yeah, I can't talk one without the other because that's what led me to the podcast. My concept was I realized I've done construction, I've done farm work, all these different things I've done over the years, and all these tradesmen I've seen around me always applying their skill set and making a living. And then I see on the flip side other people that going to college, have the same college degree as everybody else, struggling to find a job. And it's my way of combining the two worlds. Here I am with a skill set that I chose to learn over going to college, and I am flooded with work. And that I'm a little different than other tradesmen in the fact that I appreciate my knowledge. I'm not just trading hours for money anymore. I'm trying to get away from that, but I value my time. And I got distracted.
That's okay. And the name of your podcast is?
Middle Class Entrepreneur.
Do you have like a tagline about it?
I've had a few. I can't think of any right now. But basically, I think it's the survival guide for the middle class. I want to teach people to be self-reliant. That's great. And I think that's a really, entrepreneurship. And I think that we were talking about this on Monday, that it's this kind of hot thing. But, the question is it this hot thing right now, or is it that because of, social media and how interconnected we all are,
Is it that we are now more talking about it and more aware of all the things that people like you and I are really building, and that it's one of the best forms of job security in a sense is being your own boss?
Yeah, and what I'm doing is questioning what is a tradesman. Actually, I'm questioning quite a few things. What is a tradesman? I think that it's a skill set. If you have a skill set that's yours to keep, that can follow you and be marketable, as opposed to just putting in hours at a job, that's your trade. And then entrepreneurship, I believe, is different than self-employment, because so many of us tradesmen are actually self-employed, but we're trading hours for money. And we're no better off really than those people stuck in the 9-to-5 job, other than the fact we have a little bit more job security because we have a skill set that people are bringing us work, cutting out the big middleman of like a big company. But I want these tradesmen to realize, or even just self-employed people, to become more entrepreneurial, even though I think self-employed is connected to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, to talk us. So I kind of was, when you said that, it really kind of took me aback, and I was really trying to think about that. Break it down a little more. Like, so you were making this connection between tradesmen and self-employed, and the differences there, and then that you can be self-employed, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're an entrepreneur. Talk us more through that, because it's a really interesting kind of dichotomy, and with a lot of similarities and differences. So I'd like to get into your brain a little more about that, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's not a concept I have completely figured out, but that's the point of the podcast, is I get to talk to people and really try to figure out how to even word it. But as of right now, it's just this vague concept that I feel like the self-employed people, basically, they just have a job. They're just doing it for themselves.
Mm-hmm. We
should be valuing our knowledge and trying to not just swing that hammer and trade hours for money, but if we can all get to the point to where, how can we benefit from our knowledge as well and set up a longer lasting platform for ourselves? Maybe some passive income mixed in there, or just multiple streams, as opposed to you can't take a vacation because the work won't get done and you won't get paid.
Yeah, that's the one downside of the self-employment or even entrepreneurship in a sense. But really, I guess more self-employment, based on what you're saying, is that the sick pay is pretty lousy.
What sick pay?
Right. But with when you're talking about entrepreneurship, it's not just about the skill. It sounds what you're saying. It's really about So for me, as a coach and therapist, a lot of what I do is trading time for money. But the other piece of it is, building, things like through the podcast, where I have some monetization, through some sponsorships, through some courses that I'm trying to work on and create. So it's looking at how can I, still afford to take the vacation and bring in income and provide this service and value to my, potential clients and customers, while at the same time being able to breathe.
Yes.
That's a really it's so cool, and there's these like things that are very similar in many ways, but also distinctly different. And I love too how, Daniel, how you're creating this podcast that you don't even fully know a clear vision about what it is, that you're kind of creating that as you go. And I think that takes a lot of courage, and I think it's also it's kind of a creative kind of component to both you and as a person with ADHD. We haven't even really talked about that yet.
No, and I think I've mentioned to you before, I live by progress is better than perfection, and it's still a very vague concept for me, but I didn't want to figure it out on my own and it be something that doesn't make sense. I see it as a movement that I'm trying to start, and I want to get the feedback of the community that I'm trying to build and let it go in the direction it needs to go.
Well, Daniel, that's something that in the ADHD Rewired community in our Facebook group, we talk a lot about the idea of failing forward, and that failure is a direction, and that as long as we keep getting up and moving forward, that failure can be our best teacher, because it's feedback. Failure is feedback when we allow it to be. So I think as far as failure as a movement, I think that, I will definitely stand behind that. I think our entire community will stand behind that, because we're pretty familiar with having failures in our life. And it's the resiliency piece, that ability to get up and keep going forward after you hit a bump in the road, even when that bump knocks you down for a little bit. What can you use that experience from to help you grow and move forward with new information, with new perspective? So yeah, we stand behind you.
Well, look, Eric, I'm terrible at this whole podcasting thing, but I know that I'll get better. And I like this quote I just heard the other day. Winston Churchill said, success is going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That is awesome.
That's tweetable right there.
There's
so many good success and failure quotes that I love. This whole notion of failure's not an option, I think is absurd.
Yeah,
of course it's an option, and I take it often.
Yeah, small failures build into big successes, as opposed to waiting for one big failure or success.
Yeah, have you ever heard and I may have mentioned this on the podcast before. The success is a simple math equation. It's getting up one more time than you failed.
I like that.
So tell us a little bit about you and as it relates to having ADHD. How did you learn that you had ADHD?
Well, I've only known about 7 months or so, and a friend of mine who's had it all of his life, and his whole family's had it, so they knew to look for it, was talking to me about some things I've been struggling with, and one of the biggest issues was anxiety. I've tried anxiety medication and depression medication, and it just never seemed to pinpoint my symptoms. And I just so flustered all the time and couldn't even read. I'd reread the same sentence over and over, and just get so worked up if too many things came at me at once. But on the flip side, I can build anything in the way that I think abnormal. And as I was telling you before, I think in 3D, and I'm so creative, as I've noticed other people within small businesses usually are. And I think that I went so long undiagnosed because I was surrounded within the small business world with all these same symptoms that are directly related to small business, whether or not they have ADHD. And that's actually what you were on my podcast talking about, was the correlation of small business to ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, but just what we often hear is the shiny object syndrome, the so many competing priorities, the feeling of overwhelm in a lot of ways. But I'm thinking that, because I when you mention that you think in 3D, I am imagining, listeners right now, what do you mean you think in 3D? Or there's probably listeners that says, I'm not the only person that does that. Take us through that, because I think, you were mentioning also that, reading was a struggle for you. And that's a huge area that I think is not talked about enough, is reading challenges for people with ADHD. But so you're talking about how you have one area of kind of your cognition, or the way you're thinking, that is a challenge, but then you have this other area of your brain that just is, it's like your superpower. So talk to us about that superpower a little bit, about what does it mean? What's that like to think in 3D?
Well, it's actually the whole concept of having strengths and weaknesses. When it's something as simple as not being able to read, it's so frustrating when you have these other things that you're a smart person. And when I say think in 3D, I'm saying I just simply understand concepts and how things go together. And within the designing and engineering furniture, I quickly picked up AutoCAD because that's exactly how I think. You get this space to work within, and everything affects everything else. So when I look at something, I don't see it as face value. There's 30 other things involved, like, how was it built? Or if I touch it in this way, how is it affected? And it's never just, hey, look at that item. It's so broken down in my head, and I can tear it apart, put it back together before I even touch it. And I think that I share that, I think, with many other creative people who may or not have ADHD.
And I'm just imagining what that might be like. So you said you do a lot of upholstery and furniture. You build furniture, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, basically anything. And I do automotive and marine as well, but really the dyeing trade is like high-end reupholstery or design build. And yeah, I could strip down a piece of furniture, an antique, and build it back up. And I have also done some really high-end commercial jobs.
Okay, wait, hold on. So you let's say you get a client who wants you to redo their couch. So you walk us through how you think through it. I think it's really interesting.
That actually is very interesting because until you said that, I didn't think I should walk you through that. Dealing with like a floral fabric or even a plaid, how it should be is it should match everywhere, just like you drape the fabric over it. And to do that, it requires a lot of yardage because let's say where that flower ends, I need a 1/2 inch seam allowance one way on my one piece, but then I need another 1/2 inch seam allowance the other way so that where the pattern actually ends, I can sew it and then it looks like it continues. So I got to be able to visualize on the piece of furniture where everything's falling. And I usually start with like the seat cushion. I'll center like a whatever pattern in the seat cushion. And in my head, I'm shifting it up and down the piece of furniture, seeing where it affects everywhere else. So where the seat cushion ends, the in back begins. And then
so you're like manipulating this in your mind, seeing how this is going to fit together. And then you're able to determine how much material you need. Is that?
Yeah, because there's the fabric repeat. You got a horizontal repeat, you got a vertical repeat, and then that's the scary part. Some of it's like $500 to $900 a yard, and you got to make sure you get at least close on the yardage. And if it's a 36 or even a bigger repeat, like this huge repeat, one mistake means you're short a few yards, and it's a really scary thing. But yeah, it's mapping it out in my head to where in the end the back cushion matches the seat cushion, which matches the boxing of the seat cushion, which matches the deck, which matches the skirt.
So how do you coordinate all of these things? Because it seems like there's so many parts that rely on other things.
I can't really answer that. That's why I was so natural at picking up. I was 19 or 18 or 19. This guy had done it for 54 years, and he was working with his son's business, who he picked it up as well. I kind of clashed with the son a little bit, but the old man said, "You're picking this up quicker than I've ever seen anybody. Please stick with it, and just ignore my son. Stick with it." We're good friends now. We work together, and we're really good friends. But at the time, we really butted heads. And his dad said, "Please stick with it. It's a dying trade, literally. All of my friends are dead, but I want you to learn it. You'll be the youngest one that I know that." Probably for a long time in the trade.
Here's what I think. So here's this ADHD podcast, and we're talking about furniture. So it's like, why? What can we kind of pull from this? One of the things that I see so often in my practice is I work with people who have tremendous gifts, just like you just described. This thing it really is extraordinarily challenging, but for you just get it, and you don't even know how you get it. That's what I call a gift. When you are really good at something and you don't, it's like almost effortless. And I think one of the things that happens with a lot of people that I work with who have ADHD is that they think that the work that they do has to feel hard. And it's, it's almost absurd in some ways and sad, because the things that come naturally to you, and if you have people around you that say, "Wow, you're so good at that," listen to that. Because I think sometimes people will say, "Oh, because I can't read and they're telling me that I'm so good at this, they're just trying to make me feel good." It's like, no, like, what are the things people tell you that you're really good at? That's where we should be focusing. For me, it's, I can observe, behavioral nuances. It's almost hard to describe in some ways. So I could pick up on patterns of behavior and I just get it. It just jumps out at me, and I think that makes me a good therapist. So knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you're really good at, and not discrediting when somebody else says, you're really good at, this or that. I think the other component to that is, if you're a parent or even in the position to be a mentor, don't be dishonest with someone telling them that they're good at something, especially for parents. One of the things that I see, that if you have a kid who has a passion for something, and so the parent will tell the kid, you're really good at that. And then I'll look at what they're talking about. It's like, he likes it. It's great that he likes it. Let's not discourage that. Passions are great. But, there are, I like to sing. I'm not a good singer. It's so I don't want to be discouraged from singing, but I don't want to be told that I'm this amazing singer and then be like one of these people who would go on like American Idol and they are awful and they don't realize it.
Well, we live in a world where everybody gets a ribbon these days.
It's so true. It's like, no, this whole idea that everyone's a winner. It's like, no, not everybody is a winner.
Not at everything.
Right. And so this whole idea is like, yes, everyone wants to win. You play a game, whether it's a board game, a sport, or whatever the competition is. It's fun to win. It feels good to win, but it's not the only thing, and it's not the only point of why we do something.
Yeah, don't let somebody tell you you're not intelligent. There's different ways to be intelligent. Find what you're good at and your passion, and when those two meet up, then that's what you should stay doing.
Yeah, and Daniel too, when you talked about the challenge with reading, until I got diagnosed with ADHD and started taking medication, I really had struggled with the reading too. And I've described this before on the podcast, that it's this idea that you start reading something and then it triggers a thought. And then that thought triggers another thought, and so on and so on. Well, you're still reading, and by the time you get to the end of the page of the chapter, you have no idea what you just read because you didn't pause to realize, I'm not actually paying attention to what I'm reading. I'm thinking about 10 other things that were triggered by something I was reading. And I think that's it's about that focus, about quieting those other thoughts. One quick tip and a strategy that might be helpful for you or for our listeners is that when you're reading, do it actively. And what I mean by that is write notes in your book, write notes along with what you're writing. Pause after each paragraph. One of the things that I will often do in books that I read is I will write 1 or 2 words next to each paragraph that are just kind of to jog my memory and to make sure I actively know what the main point of what I just read was. And that's been a huge help for me. Underlining is not the same thing. Really writing down, so it's causing you to kind of reprocess what you just read. And I went from someone who really struggled tremendously with reading to someone who really enjoys reading. But the other option always is audiobooks.
I love audiobooks.
Yeah, I love them. I love podcasts, I love audiobooks. Is there a book that you love that you maybe can recommend to our listeners?
Well, since I'm just trying to make it a habit to start reading, I don't have many to choose from, but I was recommended to read from my girlfriend Courtney, The Alchemist, and it really spoke to me, and I loved it.
The Alchemist. I think I started reading that years ago, and I think I got through maybe the first chapter, and I wasn't feeling it. Tell me about The Alchemist, because I don't remember much about it.
Well, it's a concept of just paying attention to your surroundings and realizing that things happen for a reason. And if you're all about negativity, you're going to have negative things happen to you. But if you look at things that happen to you as gifts and they're meant to be, and you're positive, then the world and the environment and the universe wants you to have what you want. So it's just about recognizing signs, and even within yourself.
Well, that's great. So I'm going to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Audible, and then we'll be right back. I want to thank our sponsor, Audible, for making it possible for me to outsource the parts of this podcast that I don't like to do. So thank you, Audible. And I would like to encourage you to check out The Alchemist, which was Daniel Bowling's recommendation. It is available on Audible. To get your free audiobook download, go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for your free audiobook download. All right, Daniel, we are back. So let's see, where do we want to go next in this conversation?
Actually, before we get too far,
Yeah.
Can I ask you? You said you're good at your job because you're so, I don't know. I guess you pick up on people's vibes. Is that what you were saying? Can you
Sure,
go back to
we can call it vibes. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm struggling with how to put it, because I wonder if that's any relation to me having ADHD, but one of my strengths is recognizing, just on a intuition level almost, just what people are, their cues, picking up on their cues, and even go as far as picking up on their energies. I won't even be in the same room as somebody and I could feel somebody walk in. Like I know like something's about to go down, and it comes in handy when in business or managing people or even just creating new relationships. And I don't know, it took me back when you said that you could really pick up on cues like that.
Yeah, so I think that that I've kind of have always had that ability. And one of the things, it's such an interesting topic too, and I haven't even really got into it on this podcast yet, is I have a really high interest in teaching nonverbal communication, facial expressions, micro expressions, which are those really kind of subtle facial expressions that we all have. There are these universal emotions that we all have. And there's I guess you can call him a social psychologist or researcher by the name of Paul Ekman. And he has he's done a huge amount of research in this area. And he actually spent a couple years researching the universality of emotion and facial expression. He went to these remote tribes in places in the world that had never had any contact with the rest of the world, basically, and found that there is a universality to our emotions. And we have happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, fear, and contempt. I think I got 7 there. And so those are the 7 kind of universal expressions. And the reason I really became interested in this from a point of being able to teach it, the other half of my specialty is working with people with autism. And part of autism has to do with challenges often in reading nonverbal communication and nonverbal language. And we used to hear these statistics that like 60% of communication is nonverbal. It's way more than that. I've heard studies that will actually say that it's 93%. I have an exercise that I do with my clients, and I'm bringing this up because I'm looking at it right now, where I write I have a dry erase board, and I write this sentence: I didn't say that. So just 4 words. Now, how we say it, though, can completely change the meaning of that. So, for example, if I were to emphasize that first word and I said it as like this: I didn't say that. Well, that implies, somebody else did. If I said it as I didn't say that, that's emphasizing the actual focus of that sentence, that I actually didn't say that. If I were to say it as I didn't say that, maybe that means I implied it. Or if you said I didn't say that, but I said something else. So how those 4 words are delivered can completely change the meaning. Add that, so you're just hearing me say that, and it can change the meaning. Add that message with my nonverbal expressions, and that's going to add another layer to it. And so what's really interesting is that Paul Ekman has created this facial action coding system, which basically breaks down the muscles of the face and describes the sequences of facial expressions that we make that make up our emotions. And so what I discovered through teaching some of my clients with autism through these programs using micro-expression training, that these very fast, almost hard to catch facial expressions that many of us maybe pick up on naturally, but some of us don't, is that these things can be broken down into small parts and then taught, so then you can pick up the whole of the kind of the big picture of what's happening with these interactions. So these things that are intuitive for us can also be broken down and explained. So I just think that nonverbal communication is huge, and it can really, by understanding the science of it, can really help take a lot of the things that we do to the next level. So if we are, whether it's with our partner, our spouse, our friend, a business negotiation, or a client, being able to understand the nuances of their body language can really help us know how to communicate, know what the person that we're with really maybe needs to hear, or where the challenges are. If I'm working with someone and I see that they start to kind of close off their body, that tells me that, so if let's say their arms are crossing, or they're kind of just almost in this more protective position in a sense, that they're either feeling more insecure at the moment, or they're not buying what I'm telling them. So being able to recognize those things is huge. And Daniel, I have no idea. I think I just went on this long tangent about something. What was your question?
No, you touched on a lot of it. I didn't really have a question. I liked what you were saying, and I think that's going to be an interest of mine. I need to look more into all of that, because I have realized now that it can be a gift, but it can be a curse. I'm so aware of everything around me that, especially interacting with people, can send me in a spiral. I'm already overwhelmed about the details around me. Now somebody else I can feel is mad or upset, or and it's just like too much information overload.
And I think part of that can be, it's with one of these things with ADHD. It's not that we don't notice or pay attention to things. It's that we often are paying attention to everything, and that our brain doesn't filter really well. And so in the right situations, that could be great. But in the wrong situations, that can be very challenging.
I'll tell you where it was great was in the dating process. Being able to walk into like a bar and recognize who's happy with who and who's single, and just being able to call out some amazing things and throw people for a loop, just being aware of things. But I think now I've been told to use it for good and maybe work on using it in sales. And I really need to work more on my close relationships. I'm good at the outside recognizing, but I think what I really struggle with is the one-on-one connection after that.
Dan, and that's another issue that I haven't really touched yet on this podcast either, is those close, intimate friendship relationships that really take a lot of I guess sustained attention to it. That's something that I definitely need to work on as well. It's something that I'm aware of and have been more intentional about. But I think that's an area that not a lot of people are talking about, is the relationship piece for people with ADHD. We talk about it with kids often, because whether it's impulsivity or kind of getting under kids' skin, or not kind of picking up on the other cues. But as adults, I think it's really different. And some of the same things still can be a factor. But I just think it's a really interesting a challenge that a lot of us do experience, and maybe can't quite put our finger on what it is. For me, I kind of refer to myself as a introverted extrovert. So there are certain types of situations that I do like being around large groups, but they are exhausting to me. I prefer the small, intimate setting, one-on-one, two-on-one. That kind of energizes me. But for me, when let's say I'm giving a presentation and I can tell that it's being received well, that also energizes me. So we all have these very, very unique differences. So the one thing that may be unique with most of us listening is we all have ADHD, and then just scratch the surface a little bit, and we have a lot of differences just from the get-go. So we all have these nuanced differences. There are people with ADHD who are awful at math. I will include myself in there. There are people who that's like their gift. There are people who have struggled with reading. There are people who love reading and can write books. So I think it's important to not look at just one feature and apply it kind of holistically, but we see these connections. And I think that the best thing to do to really manage ADHD is get a really good understanding about it, and not to just compare yourself to one person with ADHD, but really look at what is ADHD, the big picture of it, and how do many people experience it. And that's part of kind of the show is sharing people's stories, because I think stories are powerful. That's how we relate with one another.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at was I know that it's not going to affect me in the same way as anybody else. And I'm just trying to pinpoint what exactly is my unique situation, because there's times I thought I was OCD. I thought I was dyslexic. I mean, now I'm starting to actually piece together that this all could be the ADHD.
And the other thing to also consider for all of us is, so we get this ADHD diagnosis, and maybe we've had other diagnoses in the past. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean the other ones were wrong. Maybe that just wasn't the primary. Learning disabilities, dyslexia, anxiety disorders, depression. These are common coexisting disorders that come along with ADHD. I know I got a handful of the things that I just mentioned. For me, I tend to reverse numbers, not like a mirror, but like, let's say there's like an order of numbers like 338. My brain will turn that into 388. So whenever there's a cluster of numbers where one repeats, I know for myself that that's a challenge for me. Like my brain just, like, even though I know it struggles with converting it correctly.
I do that also.
Yeah, and the other area is also I have some dysgraphia, where it's that's why I don't like to write, because my thoughts are 10 thoughts ahead by the time I finish one sentence.
Yes.
So getting that thought from my brain onto paper is a challenge, which is why I podcast, because I can talk.
Yeah, I've struggled with thinking too fast. I got to slow it down a little bit.
So, well, it's kind of fun when conversations go in places that you don't expect. Which is, it's kind of the being in the moment. And I think that, it's a fine line and a interesting kind of dance that we have to make as people with ADHD of how to be in the moment and go with it, and how to be cautious about being too much in the moment where we're not thinking through the potential consequences of our actions.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you're not going to be good at it yourself. So surround yourself with people that have the strengths that you don't, help you recognize when you need them.
That's right on. I mean, that's absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Stop trying harder, start trying differently. I just recently started outsourcing the kind of post-production part of my podcast. One of the parts I like, the other one I don't, but neither of which are actually things that I should be spending my time doing. But what's awesome is that, I outsourced on my show notes, and it's just so cool to get these show notes back so I send the episode once it's all edited, which is I actually like doing the editing, but I spend too much time doing the editing. So I'd rather be creating content. So now I have these two people that I'm working with, helping me with these things, and I just feel like $1,000,000 that I've outsourced the writing part, and I get it back, and I'm like, wow, this is really good. Because it's painful for me. It's really hard for me to do the summarization. It's it's like I have to think about, okay, now what 3, 4, 5 words do I use to now create a catchy title for this episode? We just talked about 10 different things. So that summarization is also a challenge. So yeah, knowing our strengths, accepting our challenges, and I don't look at them as weaknesses. I look at them as challenges, because they are things to be overcome. And so maybe the challenge is accepting the area of difficulty and learning how to outsource it. Maybe the challenge is learning a different way of doing something. But focus on the strengths. There are so many things that we are good at, and we owe it to ourselves and to other people to really focus on our areas of strength. Because that's how we're going to make our contribution to the world, to our communities, to our families, That's what's going to help us feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, and I think one of my biggest strengths is recognizing the strengths in other people and not being afraid to admit that they're better at certain things, and being, I guess that makes me kind of a leader. And I always build teams around me that can, help support my end goal. And I just really see how things are connected. And that's as back to the podcast that I'm doing. I think the businesses in general are at a business model level, exactly the same if you take the trade out. So at the business level, how can we help each other out since we're all struggling in the same ways? And I'm trying to relate that in every aspect of my life. How is it all connected, and how can I use my resources around me and those around me to better myself?
Daniel, I think that you are going to do some really amazing things. You're a connector, and I view myself as a connector as well, how we can connect these ideas and synthesize these ideas and come up with these new and novel concepts. And I think that's a real gift that not all of us have, but some of us do. And I think that it's cool that you're kind of in the beginning of this phase right now, that you're still trying to kind of feel it out and figure out where it's going to take you. So I really can't wait to see what you end up doing.
Yeah, it would be nice to fast forward a little bit. This is the hard part, I think.
Yes, absolutely. But it's, in the moment, it feels like it's taking forever. But then when you look back and you say, wow, it's like I created that. That's kind of the value of planning and then reflecting upon your goals. So Daniel, we are getting to the end here, and I don't want to forget, because I think I did forget in our initial interview that we did on Monday that we are redoing now, the part of the show that I call the random question round. And this is the part of the conversation that has nothing to do with ADHD, which then paradoxically has everything to do with ADHD. All right, did I forget to ask you about this on Monday?
Yeah, I don't believe you did.
Okay, all right. So, I don't think I asked you like anything that I intended on. And today we just had a cool conversation. So
we were both off on Monday.
So it was a redo, and we got it rewired and rescheduled ourselves together. All right. So here is the first question from the random question round. What do you think will be the next big thing?
In general or for me?
You can answer that any way you want to.
Well, I honestly think that it's already happening, and that's with podcasts. I think that's going to be the next huge thing.
Awesome. I agree with that. I might be biased, and you might be too, but I agree. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I think I'd like to be able to freeze time. Sometimes I feel too rushed and I need to analyze everything. At the same time, I need to work on not overanalyzing, but I would like to be able to figure out before I can move forward.
Okay, so would you then rather have the superpower to freeze time so you could spend all the time in the world overanalyzing? Or would you like to have the superpower of not having to overanalyze, to be able to weigh the pros and cons and make quick decisions?
Yeah, if I could know the instant right decision as my superpower, then that's a better answer.
I think that is probably the one of the best superpowers that nobody's ever said. It's the ability to know what the right thing to do is.
Immediately.
Amazing. I take that over flying any day.
I want to change my answer.
Wait, change it again?
No, that's my final answer. Right
Okay,
there.
Awesome. That's so cool. If you can invent something, what would it be?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I really feel like there's no new ideas. There's just ways to make everything better. So, I don't know. I think it'd be something to... Geez, that's a hard one.
Well, I have a question. So, one of my colleagues is a psychologist and coach, Kim Kensington. She wrote a book I think called The Procrastination Doctor. She's also a hilarious person. She does some comedy, and she did a whole stand-up routine about the idea of building a couch that has a timer with an eject function. And I think you're the perfect person to actually build this.
Yeah, I could be a big part in that. I think it'll be. I can make it comfortable.
And the upscale version of this would then be once it kicks you out of the couch spikes will come out of the couch. You can't sit back down.
There you go.
I think we'll have to have a 3-way call together to work out the specs.
I'll start on the drawings right now.
That's all. You're probably already planning it out in your head.
Yeah, we can't even talk anymore. I'm already on to that.
Okay, you know what? I think I want to end it there because that's a fun idea. I'm just imagining what you're putting together in your head in 3D.
You know, and it's funny because I know we're joking, but I was automatically thinking, well, how could I make the spikes come out and then retract back in and everything still work and look good when it's in? Even though it's a joke, I already was going down that path.
Like, so you're already on like production and, you know.
Yeah, so we know the concept. We want spikes to come out. We know big picture view. Now I'm backing it up and already trying to make it functional.
That is awesome. That's so how fast can you draw a prototype?
Well, I'm not great at drawing, and it's in my head. So the struggle is to get it out, and I would either do a quick rough thing in AutoCAD and let my partner take over, or I would walk him through it. We could do it in different cities. I could just call him up on the phone and he could build it in there, but I am no good at drawing.
Oh my gosh. My brain is just doing all kinds of acrobatic flips right now, thinking about the possibilities. All right. Well, we're going to end it there before we hit the hour mark. So Daniel, thank you again for your time. I appreciate you coming on again. Tell people where they could reach you and where they could find your podcast.
All right. Well, real quick before I do that, there was one thing that we said last time that I want to repeat again. I know many of us struggle with the price of the medications, and I was just told about a site called GoodRx, I believe, and you might want to check on that. But it cut my Ritalin from like $85 down to like $25 at CVS. It's like a coupon you can pull up on your phone.
Awesome. Thanks for remembering that, because I now that you bring that up, I remember saying something about how you just saved all my listeners a bunch of money. The economic impact that we just had on our listeners is huge.
I was happy when you said I brought some value, so I wanted to make sure that got brought back into this re-recording.
It's those connections. One idea sparks another, then another.
Yeah. So, and how you can find me, middleclassentrepreneur.net. Facebook, or on Twitter. I would love to hear from anybody on Twitter at Daniel E. Bowling, Bowling.
Awesome, and you can include me in there as well at Eric Tivers. And hey, Daniel, I don't remember if you are a part of the ADHD Rewired community on Facebook. If you're not a part of it, I'm going to send you an invite as soon as we hang up on this call, so you can be part of our community and get to chat with everyone else in there.
I would love that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and you know where to reach Daniel, and thanks for saving our listeners a bunch of money on their prescriptions. And just as a reminder both for you and for our listeners, the CHAD conference is coming up November 13th through the 15th, 2014, because podcasts live on forever. If it's beyond that date, look up on chad.org for when the next one will be. Daniel, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, ADHD Rewired community, as always, I want to thank you for listening. And I want to thank Winona for her 5-star review in iTunes. Winona says, ADHD from a real-life perspective. Good listen, useful tidbits, and a real-life perspective that makes me feel like I'm not the only one. Thanks, Winona, for that review. Do you have a story to share about your ADHD? If you want to be a guest on ADHD Rewired, go to ADHDrewired.com and click the yellow bar that says Be a Guest. Are you looking for a coach? Scheduling a free 20-minute consultation with me is super easy. Go to erictivers.com and click the blue Request an Appointment bar. Or, if your podcast app supports the clickable link in the show notes, click that link that says Schedule an Appointment. We're on Facebook. Like our Facebook page and submit your request to join our community. Have you registered for the 2014 International Conference on ADHD? It will be in the Chicago area, November 13th through the 15th. The world's top experts in ADHD will be there. There are over 70 sessions, including my session, Productivity 2.0, Getting Things Done with ADHD, Strategies, Apps, and Other Tools to GTD with ADHD. If you have any comments, feedback, or suggestions on what would make ADHD Rewired even better, please contact me through my website, ADHDrewired.com. Do you have ideas for show topics, or maybe you'd like to be a guest? Go to ADHDrewired.com and use the contact form on that page. To the members of the ADHD Rewired coaching group, remember, sometimes we need to focus on less to get more done. You have created some really awesome star charts to focus on your one thing. And here's to accountability. I shared it with my online group and now I'm going to share it with you. It was my goal this week to get home at least one time to put my son to bed. I'm recording this outro on Thursday, October 9th, and so far, I've done this twice. I'll keep you posted on how I'm doing on this. I want to end by expressing my gratitude to Peter Shankman. I attended his Shankmind Mastermind group yesterday in Chicago, and while I'm still processing this day, here's what I took away. In our journey of self-improvement and self-awareness, sometimes we need to begin by challenging our own thoughts and beliefs, because sometimes we need to rethink what we think we think. Until next time.